Okay, just about a word about safety here from the outset. Now, there are some potential dangers in working with strut assemblies. When these springs become compressed, if they would slip open, if they would slip off, or something would break, you don't want to be anywhere near this end of it. Always keep that in mind, safety first when working on these. Get a good quality spring compressor, take your time, and stay out of the danger zone here when the spring is compressed. So what I'm going to do is can that one and use this one, which I'm kind of happy I saved now, but I see the poor condition of the other one. So one thing that's important is to maintain the relationship of the cap to the spring to this rubber bumper part here, and also the lower spring to the strut. In the lower part there's a hole here, and I've made a mark with white paint through the spring. Of course, this is going to be replaced here. It's the lower part of the strut. But likewise on top, we've got that same relationship. So when we take this all apart, we'll be able to get it back together in the same orientation. So here's our strut now mounted in a vise. So now we can begin working on the compression part of this job. Here's the replacement. I've got a Monroe strut, quality strut from Advance Auto. I also took advantage of their tool rental program here. And so we've got two of these spring compressors. Now, the way these work, they're just going to fit over 3 of the coils here. I'm going to put these 180 degrees apart and then start cranking them down. Cinch them up. There's these little locking pins here. I said 180 apart. Cinch them up. These locking pins go across. They fit kind of tight on here. Anyway, they're going to tap them into place. And they're going to keep that from moving. We're starting out here 6 inches. The actual spring deflection right now is 6 inches apart. And the instructions on this, and you should always read the instructions, it's about 6 3/8. But by the time we're going to compress these, the maximum compression according to the instructions should be about 3 inches. And that's way down here. So we may not have to go that far, but we'll see. Okay, I'm not going to show you this whole process, of course. It'll bore you silly, but we're just going to keep working these back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just keeping them even. Take a measurement every now and then to make sure you're not straying out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. You want to stay even. Okay, we're at about 5 inches now. Four and 3/4. Now, as we move on, it gets harder. The spring gets under more and more compression. And we're about 4.5 now. Yeah, just over 4, about 4 1/8. Okay, we're at about 3 5/8 now. What we're looking for is to hear the spring come up to where it's free of... Okay, I heard it spring off the bottom here. I know we're close. I notice this top cap is very free now. Okay, we're pretty close to having enough compression on the spring. So what we have now is this upper spring. Tension is released, is removed on it. You can see me moving it around here. It's pretty much from end to end freed up. And I got that with about 3.5 inches of deflection here, of compression I should say, on this spring. And I see as I move this, you can see the spring now moves. So the tension, you can see it move just a little bit there. The tension is off the spring. And that's important that you verify that the tension is off before you try and take this nut off. Okay, so this is the toolage we're going to use. We're going to start with a 6.10mm 3/8 inch drive socket to fit over the end of the strut. And then going over the strut nut, we have this 13/16 deep well spark plug socket, which I find for some reason that I have to tap on. Fit that tight. And next we have a wrench. Got a 7/8 inch wrench. It's over the top. Then an extension bar, 3/8 inch. That's going to go into the socket. I've got a breaker bar and a 1/2 inch to 3/8 inch adapter here. So with this stuff set up, okay, looks like we're loose. Okay, there's our strut. Here's our strut nut. Off comes the cap. And there's the next piece. At this point we can pull our spring assembly off, set it down, and all that remains is the boot. Now also, of course, this rubber isolator will have to be reused on the bottom. And again, it's helpful we have everything marked, so everything's going to go back into the same orientation it was in. Okay, there's some instructions on the strut here to rotate the shaft and then send it up. There it goes. Okay. So that's how we get the strut back up in its vertical position. Just checking out the spring back. This one is harder to push down. You can see some difference in the action from the other one. If you look at the original strut, I can push this down quite a bit easier. Seems to come back a lot slower. Okay, I cleaned up the parts a little bit. So first of all, we're going to put this rubber isolator in place. Now, there's holes that line up here. There's a couple little notches, little protrusions that'll seat. And there, once again, are a little paint mark, which I guess really wouldn't have been necessary owing to the fact that there are openings on there. Okay, so next up, the spring. Again, here's where a mark is going to come in handy, getting this oriented exactly the way it was. Again, stay out of this end of it, your face, in case the worst thing happened and it did come loose. Okay, got my marks lined up. Okay, next up is this boot. And after that, this bearing and I believe it's called a jounce assembly. And again, we have a mark on it. It's going to line up with a mark on the spring itself. You can see where a spring mark is, where a paint mark is here. So we're going to get that lined back up. And lined up down here, and lined up here. And then the final component is going to be the cap. And then of course the nut, which we're going to have to torque down. Okay, so we'll start the nut. Of course, we're going to have to set our little rig up here again. First, the socket, 10mm socket, followed by a 13/16, which we have to tap on. Put the seats all the way down, followed by extension, a 3/4 inch, and something to hold that in place. Okay. We're nowhere near seated yet, so okay, the specs for this on torque are 75. So what I'm going to do is just going to have to make my own best judgment here, because I can't get a torque wrench on this, the type I have. So I'm just going to make sure it is good and tight. So I'm happy with that. So now we're at the point where we can use our wrenches. And all our toolage. Get this last mark lined up here. This top cap. Get it lined up with the paint mark. And at this point, if everything's lined up, we can decompress the spring. Do this gradually. You know, I go like an 8 count on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that wasn't good. Okay, continuing. Tension anymore, so it can move on you, which it just did for me. So on and on, we're going to go like this, back and forth. until we have all this compression out of it and it's back to 6 inches. Okay, we're back, 6 inches plus complete decompression. So next we'll just put the strut back on.